he was a dude, like a real dude. Probably, for me, probably one of the most important people who's kind of come out of Europe, because he invented the printing press, right? Movable type. So he kind of carved letters into pieces of wood, set them into words, inked it, and then put a piece of paper over it and printed. He first printed the Bible. I think back in the day that was an important book. But and what that meant was that the printing press was invented, and ideas, for me, that is the most better than the internet, because it meant that ideas could be shared, knowledge, information, news could be shared across massive amounts of space, across generations, across time. Back in the day, if I wanted to share something with you, I kind of had to meet you, right? I had to talk to you. Maybe I'd write it down. If I was really rich, I'd kind of carve it into some stone, and that'd kind of get handed around. Not very widespread. But with the invention of the print press, it meant that information was cheap to reproduce and could be sent across the globe. Well, across Europe, at least. And across time, right? Like, there's stuff that was printed in the 1500s that we still have today and that we're still learning from. And so, for me, Johannes Gutenberg, a real dude. But the reason I've named this If Johannes Gutenberg Wrote CSS is because once he started, once this print press became kind of popular around Europe, a bunch of other dudes, and they were all dudes, unfortunately, well, at least the ones that we know of, the ones that kind of we study, were all dudes, really tried to think about what it meant to print information and to print letters. And the rules that they came up with are still valid today. It's like nothing has changed over 400 or 500 years. And so what I thought would be great would be to talk about those rules, and talk about how we can use those rules in CSS when we're building the web. Because we want the web to be legible, beautiful, but also, I think, a sense of, we talked about authenticity, right? Type is a really great way to express yourself and your authentic self. And that's all, I know that's graphic design, that sounds like branding, but when done right, it's a really great way of expressing yourself and being true to who you are, right? Anyway, and as front-end developers, I think, we can learn some stuff like that. So anyway, this is the guy. I probably should have chosen some type properties for what he's saying rather than display flex, but anyway. So really quickly, we're going to go through kind of 4 things. I'm going to talk about what typography is. I'm going to talk about letter forms, the grid, and hierarchy. And for each of those things, this is mainly around kind of rules around type, because I assume all of you guys know CSS already. So it's not a CSS lecture around type. It's around type and what the relevant CSS rules we can use to kind of make our work really beautiful and really legible and all that kind of stuff. Just discovered if you say the grid, oh, I missed that. Okay. Am I meant to be keeping up with the Zoom comments, or I don't have to, right? Okay, good. What is typography? Okay, so I'm doing my best to be as nice as possible with the way I'm talking, right? I'm trying to be smiley, On radio, they say, even if no one can see you, should try to smile when you speak to the microphone because they can hear a smile. Anyway, so I'm trying to be smiley, I'm trying to be open, I'm wearing my favorite outfit. I'm trying to be really kind of, I'm expressing myself and I can be welcome, welcome. But can you imagine if I went up to one of you guys and just whispered in your ear, welcome? Super creepy. And that welcome, even though I'm saying the same word and the same sounds and the same letters, completely different meaning, right? If I go welcome, great. Welcome, not so great. So we have all these amazing tools when we talk to communicate. Graphic designers, right, on the web, as front-end developers, we don't have those tools. We don't have body language and an amazing outfit that cost me lots of money, and we don't have all this kind of stuff, right? We've only got type when we try to convey information with text. And so typography is taking sound and mannerisms and turning them into shapes, right? That's what type essentially is. And these guys, Gutenberg, Baskerville, Caslin, all these fonts that they're named after really amazing people who've spent their whole life thinking about how they can change sounds and mannerisms into shapes. I'm going to take an example that my friend Fabian, who's over there, in a amazing Pop Will Eat Itself t-shirt, which, again, amazing type on that t-shirt. He had this great example. You see that free toy is great. Not so great. Right? You wouldn't trust that. You'd be like, no. Don't want skydiving lessons from this. Actually, no, it's all right. Actually, you know what? No. My son had to get 4 fillings, went to the dentist today, got a little pack, Comic Sans, right? Right? Because he went to a pediatric dentist, right? And you know why they do that, right? They Comic Sans, children, blah, blah, blah. But not what you want from a dentist who you're giving a bunch of money to fix your kid's teeth, right? So type is really important. Type is really important. So the first thing we talk about when we talk about type are letter forms. How am I going? Am I doing all right time-wise? Yeah? Anyway, okay. So we come from the Latin alphabet. Romans spoke Latin. They also wrote Latin. I think they wrote it. They did write it. But they also chiseled stuff, right? Trajan's column, really old, like Jesus old, right? Inscribed with a chisel and a mallet, right? That feels important, doesn't it? Like you don't just like, and you can see here, see these like what we call serifs? These like little lines? That's a remnant of the chisel and the hammer, right? And so these guys, serifs. We all know what a serif font is. Or maybe we don't, sorry. This is a serif font because it's got serifs. Serifs then, they feel important. Like we don't need to know the history of Latin or chisels or Romans or Trajan's column. We don't need to know. But somehow we just know that they feel important, right? Like you don't just chisel stuff like a letter to your kid, right? You chisel stuff like the 10 Commandments or something important, right? And so you see this in newspapers. They love a serif font because they want to impart importance, knowledge, gravitas, all that kind of stuff. They love it. They love a serif. Sydney Morning Herald. This one's interesting because that's a serif, but it's actually based on kind of a nib pen. Again, back in the day before the print press, people would write, only a few people knew how to write back in the day. And so you would only write things down if they were important or if you felt that they were important. Serif, except for editor's pick. Not serif, but serif. But actually, that's interesting. I only just noticed this. All this metadata, like 1 hour ago, that's in sans serif. Not so important, right? But the actual content, headlines, serifs. New York Times. There's Fran Drescher. I pulled that out when July 13. That's how long I've been preparing this. It's pretty good, hey. None of this last minute. Okay. sans serif fonts. Doesn't have any serifs. Sleek, modern, fast. Perfect for the New York subway system. Probably the most famous use of Helvetica, right? Perfect. When you build a subway system, you want people to think it's fast, efficient. You're not stuffing around with chisels. You're going fast. I should have got the Jay-Z line, shouldn't I? I should have put that one in. Right? So, the rules, font face is the CSS rule when I don't want to harp on, because we all know this, right? But yeah, when I write CSS, I like to define the font family. If I'm using a custom font, I like to define that family as its own separate thing, so that I can switch between different faces, font faces. It's such a silly name, isn't it? @FontFace. Sounds like a thing a kid would make up. Yeah, and normally I would also put like a bunch of different formats. So WAF, WAF1, WAF2, so that you've got fallbacks. And I'd start with WAF2 and kind of fall back. I put swap in because Google Lighthouse likes font display swap. But Fabian, we were just talking last week and you think there's a better one for that. What is it? What are we using now? Sorry, I have put you on the spot. This was not, okay. Does anyone, who uses something else other than swap? Do people know what swap is? Do you want a quick rundown? Yeah, a quick rundown? Okay. A quick rundown is basically, these fonts aren't system fonts, right? They're saved on the server. A custom font is saved on the server of your website, and then it takes like a second or half a second or however long, however good your connection is and how powerful your computer is, to find that font and load it and render all your information. So I think the default is, basically the default is we aren't going to render any words until we find the font, and then we'll render your text. Not great, right? If you've got a slow connection, you're just left with nothing for like 5 seconds. Whoa. CSS inception. Swap means that it will render the information or your text in whatever font it can find. And then when it finds the grain back font, for example, it will then swap it over. So you aren't left with like a blank page. But the one that we're using now, fallback.
Which doesn't swap for about 100 milliseconds. It gives the browser about 100 milliseconds of something really short.
Yep.
If it doesn't swap, if it hasn't loaded it in that time, it will put in the sort of available.
Cool. Did everyone get that?
Yeah, it's like kind of like gives you a brief window, so you avoid that sort of swapping of the fonts.
Split the diff, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. But it's kind of like so small that it won't affect performance, at least percentage.
And does Google Lighthouse like that?
They don't mention the fallback display.
Because they always recommend swap, don't they? Yeah. Okay, anyway, diversion. Take a photo of that. These are my favorite type foundries, if you want. You've got really big kind of like commercial type, clean type. They're like big kind of like, they serve, But then you've also got these really amazing independent typographers, like Margot Levesque, who we ended up getting a custom font from her for the Interaction website. This guy, Tom Schwager, seems like a cool dude. Emailed him a couple of times. Pangram's, Pangram's just one dude as well. Pangram. Does anyone know what a pangram is? That's a palindrome. I think yes, yes.
Well, you get a whole bunch of tiles to make a rectangle, and then your challenge is to make a rectangle.
It's like an anagram of shapes. You rearrange the basic components of
If your words become frogs, then sure.
anagrams. We would do that with letters.
Yeah, an anagram is like yeah, to make a new word. Yeah. Cryptic crossword kind of stuff. Yeah. Okay, what we're going to do. Sorry, I teach and I need to feel like a 2-hour lecture, and sometimes I like really need to stretch out a 10-minute lecture into like 2 hours, and that's what I'm doing now. Sorry, but I can't. We've got 20 minutes. Okay. What we're going to do, we're going to take these rules, we're going to take this amazing pie recipe, which I've called Hon's Amazing Pie Recipe, right? And we're going to apply these rules to this recipe for the web to see how this all works, right? Not my pie, I found it on the internet, it's Burke Street Bakery pie, but I'm calling it Hon's pie, right? So this is the recipe, no markup, right? Absolutely no markup except for your boilerplate HTML stuff, right? Give it some markup, unordered lists, H2s, right? You get your default browser styling, right? It's all right. It's not like, and it's responsive, right? Which is amazing. That would look okay on a 400 pixel screen. Kind of not so great when you spread it out, but okay. So let's have a look at this pie. Serif, does this pie feel like a serif font or a sans serif font? Put your hands up if you think serif. So that, it feels more like that than that? Yeah? What do people think? It does, hey. It's like an important pie. Like that's a really important pie. Like, you know, that's not like a 4 and 20, 2.5 minutes in a microwave pie. That's like chiseled in stone pie. Okay, great. Let's give it Reckless New. Reckless New, I think, is from Klim Foundry. They're from New Zealand. Cool. Okay. Next up, the grid. The grid is really important. We use the grid for all these reasons. The main one, though, the main two I want to point out is that it makes your material intelligible. It makes it easier to understand. The second is that it makes our job easier. With the grid, you're not guessing where you need to put stuff. You've got a grid. You put shit wherever your grid tells you to put it. It makes our job easier. I use the grid for everything, even just laying out 5 lines of text. I always use a grid, right? I always start everything with a grid. It makes my job easier. It makes your job easier in reading it, I hope. Maybe it doesn't, right? And the grid, this is your classic 12-column grid. You can do everything with it, everything. People think a grid's going to restrict you. It doesn't. It actually frees you up in that it makes, you can get static pages, heavy, but good, right, if you need that. You can be energetic. You can be off-grid just so you're a bit quirky. You know, if you're a quirky kind of person, go off the grid. Have these random 2-grid columns empty, you know. Heavy, you know, strong. Maybe you're a lawyer. This one I don't know, what are you there? Skydiver. You're a skydiver. Display grid, easy. CSS finally, well not finally, it's been a while now. Brought in grid, right? I love it. I used to wrangle with Flex. Fabian's really old. He used to wrangle with tables to get a grid. Yeah. I think we still need tables for emails though, right? Yeah. Yeah. And tables, yeah. Yeah. Tables for tables. That's the only time you should be using a table. I used Flex a lot. But now, the past kind of couple of years, I use grid. I use grid when it's like 2 dimensions. You want to line stuff up horizontally and vertically. Whereas I use flex when I only want to line things up on one plane, whether it's, flex column or flex whatever, the other one. I'm nervous, guys. Can you tell? Okay. So I've added a grid here. I've made it a 26 column grid because I like to start here and end there so that it becomes a 24 column grid, and I use the first and last column as kind of my margins for the page. I like that because it means that if you ever have a full bleed image or anything, you can kind of do that. You can just have that image start from column 1 and end in column 26. But I like working with a 24 column grid. I like using each column as a gutter if I need that, as opposed to using gap. I don't like gap. It doesn't sit with me. Yeah, so you can see here, grid column start 2, grid column end 26. That's 27, by the way. Yeah, cool.
No white changes.
What's that?
White changes.
Okay, because we've got 26 columns. We take away that column, take away this one, we're left with 24. I love 24 columns because you can go 12, 12. You can go 3 times whatever that is. 8 columns of 3. You can go 6 columns of 4, right? Like, it's really kind of flexible. Whereas if you're like, let's say you had 23 columns, is that a prime number? That is a prime number. 23 columns, you can't split it in half. You can only really go like 10 and then 13 or 11. Like, it's so, nah. 24 columns. So I start with 26, get rid of 1 and 26 to be left with 24. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, line length. Too long. Way too long. Your eye ends up here and then you're like, where do I go? And then you end up here. We've all done that before. We've gone from that line to that line all the time. This one, poetry, right? Your eye gets too tired. You're going perfect, right? 50 to 75 characters, optimal. Robert Burnquist put it in his book, Elements of Typographic Style. Amazing book. In CSS, we have a max width property where we can define the character numbers. I've used 75 characters here. It's cool, I like it. Or you can set it manually you figure it out. You kind of just have a look and you go, have it start at column 2 and end at column 13. Here, that's 75 characters, a max width of 75 characters. And it's 75 characters based on the M, so your font size of that element. It doesn't. It doesn't stick to the grid, which is why if you wanted to be super strict, then rather than using a max width of 75 characters, define the width of your body or whatever through the column. So if you go 2 to 13, it would start kind of here and you go 1, 2, 3, 4, and it kind of end up like there. And if you kind of just have a look, you go, yeah, that kind of feels like 75 characters, or 50 to 65. I mean, 60 to 85, or 50 to 75. Okay. Finally, hierarchy. Hierarchy means it's easy to scan and it's inviting, right? If it's all the same, people don't know how to interact with your page. It gives you multiple. That's what I love most about hierarchies. It gives you multiple points of entry. It's like an annual. No, that's a boring. It's like Wikipedia, right? I always go straight into personal life. It's the first thing I want to go who they're married to, if they have any kids. It's the first thing. And then I might go to like career, right? And Wikipedia's hierarchy allows you to do that, right? Because you can scan through the headings and you can kind of enter where you want to enter. It's like, yeah, anyway. So you can create, we all know how to create hierarchy with text size. Any kid knows that, right? You tell a kid, hey, you've got three shapes on the page, make one shape the most important. They'll just make it really big, right? Or they'll make it fat, or they'll make it red, right? Like, but the grid is actually all you need. And that's what separates, like, that's finesse. If you can create hierarchy with just the grid and you don't rely on these like cheap tricks, right? Yeah, like that is like chef's kiss, right? That's why, yeah. Okay, so I've used like Tailwind's reset, which kind of gets rid of all kind of that default styling, gets rid of all kind of like font size and all that kind of stuff. And I've divided up the page into kind of sections. So this is like how to make the short crust pastry, and this is the ingredients, and then this is like the pie directions, and these are the ingredients for the inside of the pie. And by doing that, just by using the grid, you can separate information. This is chef's kiss, by the way. Like I did a pretty damn good job. You know, there's no color, no imagery, no, right? Thank you. Right? That just uses the grid to create information hierarchy and to make it easy to read. Just using one left column class, one right column. Actually, you know what? It's a bit more CSS than that. But essentially, that's what it is, right? You got your left column, you got your right column, that's it. So we're going, I just put this slide up. This is how important typography is. Hard to read, not great. You wouldn't want to make this pie. Easy to read, easy to scan, accessible. You want to make this pie, right? That's a good pie. So that's it. Thank you so much, everyone.